Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jenna Wimsatt, and I'm an outreach specialist here at the AAMC. In this session, New Medical Schools Myths and Tips, newly accredited medical schools will share their experiences in admitting a first-year class and address some of the myths, benefits, and tips of attending a new medical school. I am joined today by two medical school professionals, Dr. Lindia Wills-Jacobo and Carlos Tapia. Lindia Wills-Jacobo is the Associate Dean for Admissions, Kaiser Permanente School of Medicine, and Professor of Clinical Science. She comes to Kaiser Permanente School of Medicine from the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, where she had been on the faculty since 1996. She was a professor of pediatrics and for the last 10 years served as the Assistant Dean for Diversity and Community Partnerships and Director of the Program in Medical Education Health Equity. Her scholarly interests include healthcare workforce diversity, cultural humility, and the practice of medicine, advocacy for underserved populations, and combating health inequities. She developed an implicit bias curriculum for medical students, conducted implicit bias workshops for faculty and residents, and has spoken widely on this topic. Carlos A. Tapia is the Executive Director of Admissions and Enrollment Operations at the TCU and UNTHSC School of Medicine. He started his career in higher education as a student worker, where he developed a passion for helping students achieve their educational goals. Carlos strives to implement student systems, processes, and programs that support the seamless transfer of students from recruitment, application, selection, matriculation into medical school, as well as their continued experience through graduation and beyond. His work also includes the planning and implementation of pipeline program activities. In his current role, he was instrumental in the recruitment and matriculation of the inaugural class. Carlos earned his Bachelor of Arts in Legal Studies from Western International University and his Master's of Education in Educational Leadership from Northern Arizona University. So Carlos, if you'd like to begin, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for allowing me to participate in this webinar. As I was introduced, we were one of the few new medical schools that came online about a year ago here in North Texas. There's a couple other programs coming online, but I'll share with you guys the experience that we had here in Texas, and so we'll get started right away. And so in 2016, our leadership came together, and there was a memorandum of understanding signed by both institutions for the creation of this medical school. And so they went around and looked at what had been done in medical education for the last 150 years, and they changed a lot of the way that we deliver our content and our curriculum. And so that's one of the key things about a new medical school, is that all medical schools coming online are looking to redefine how medical education is delivered, and that's some of the nuances that our applicants need to navigate in order for them to select the program that's best for them. And so we started, of course, as a School of Medicine here in North Texas, and I think one of the things that all applicants must be ready for is the application opening. Our application and our start of our recruitment season really is dictated a lot by our governing body, the LCME, the Liaison Committee on Medical Education. And it truly is when they give us the go-ahead that we're okay to start recruiting that our application opens. So it might open up in a non-traditional time frame, meaning that it doesn't open always at the same time, and it might vary by school. I know that our first year, our application opened in November, and we had just 4 short weeks to recruit applicants from across the country to apply to our program. So applicants must sort of be on the lookout for that when looking at new medical schools. And like I mentioned, the program has changed significantly from what other medical schools are doing, and all medical schools do it very uniquely and very differently. But for new medical schools, the nuances for our applicants to understand what is it that how we differentiate ourselves in the landscape, and understanding that we are a new school and that our program is different and that we might have something that another medical school doesn't have. And so understanding that also positions the applicant better for the recruitment process and the application process. You also have to learn more about the institution. We're in a unique situation for our medical school because it is 2 partner institutions. We are, on one end, we are a private institution. On another end, we're a state institution or a public institution. And so you have to understand, where the partnership is for us, but also where the foundation of that medical school is is based out of. And so, again, for us, it's that nuance between the two institutions. And we're not one school unique in itself. We are truly a partnership between two institutions. The other thing that sometimes I think applicants don't look at or tend to forget is the location of the medical school. And so location is something that we always emphasize for our applicants to make sure that they understand where the medical school is located, would they feel comfortable being in this area if they were to get an offer of admission, and really come to explore the area when and if they get an opportunity to come visit during their interview day. Because the last thing I think any medical school would like is to have a student that is completely disinterested in the area, but are only here because they want to be just in medical school. You truly have to fall in love with the city. And so the other thing that we encourage applicants to do is always come up with questions. Once you reviewed our marketing materials, once you reviewed our website, always come prepared with questions or email questions. I know that our office is very receptive to receiving calls and emails with any inquiries, any questions of information that you misread, but come prepared with questions specific to the program, not so much general questions. It's good to have a couple general questions, but also focus on specifics of the program. And it's apparent to us admissions officers when an applicant is calling or asking questions in a broad sense, and we know that they're asking that, but it's also nice to hear sometimes those specific questions that belong to our program. It shows that you have an interest in our program and that you've taken the time to read about us. And then the last thing that we encourage applicants is always to have an open mind. We are a new program. It helps avoid frustrations. We don't have a lot of history. It creates just havoc when you assume that there is something there more than what we are demonstrating to you. So what's available on our website, the information that we publish, is there for you to read. But again, it goes back to asking those questions, and when you receive an answer, we hope that you come with an open mind and understand that as a new program, we're still navigating a lot of the nuances that come with establishing a new medical school. It definitely is no easy fit. And so let's talk about some of the myths that are apparent in a new medical school here. I think the first is that we are an accredited medical school, and that's a false. Definitely we are an accredited medical school. There's different steps to receive full accreditation, but without the blessing of the accrediting body, we wouldn't be able to open our doors and recruit. And again, there's different designations for the different steps of accreditation, but we are a fully accredited for all intents and purposes of recruiting and admitting our first class. Another myth that we get a lot, even though we say we're a new program, is that we have students. So a lot of the questions that we get are, how are your students doing? And the reality is that we don't have any students. So if it is a new program, understand that there is no students, there is no history of any student population because it is a new program. Another myth is that we have no clinical presence, and I think this is something that sometimes applicants believe because we got asked this all the time during our first interview season is it my responsibility to go out and look for my own preceptors for my clerkships? And the answer is no. Our leadership and any new medical school does a lot of legwork to establish the clinical relationships that are needed in order for them to move their curriculum forward, and that includes a lot of the clinical placements in the city that they are located in. And a lot of hospitals use different models for their clinical practice. I know that we use a distributed model, so we don't just have one single clinical entity. We have multiple within our city here in Fort Worth, Texas. Another myth is that we don't have adequate staff and faculty, and I can tell you again that this goes back to what our accreditors dictate that we must have and what we must do. We must have that infrastructure to support our class. It is safe to say that we would not be able to recruit a class and bring somebody in, students or faculty, without the infrastructure to support them and support the faculty development as well. And we recruit from our clinical partners here for faculty to be our faculty directly to work with our students. So yes, we do have the adequate staff and faculty. We might not have a full-fledged 20-year, 50, 150-year robust university system, but we have the staff and the faculty to start to get to that point and help support our students through their educational journey. And so a couple more myths. that we have historical data. Again, we don't have any students, and a lot of the questions that we would get right at the beginning is, or even out in recruitment fairs is, well, what are your step one scores averages? And so we don't have that information. So be mindful that it helps avoid the frustration for applicants when we don't give the data. It's because we don't have any data. That truly is that there is no data that exists. So avoid that frustration by knowing that it is a new medical school and we don't have that data for you. The other thing, and I think a lot of applicants are keen to going to SDN, and we as an institution here at the TCU and UNT HSU School of Medicine follow SDN and are active participants in our blog, is that I read it on SDN, and sometimes when you say that, sometimes it's not true. We know that there's a lot of myths, a lot of misinformation out there. It's best if you come straight to the source. Contact our office and ask that question that's pertaining to your situation, or ask the question that you might have read somewhere that might have raised a red flag for you. Come to us. We're the source that we can provide the best answer for you. We ask that while SDN is a good source for some information because we're on there constantly monitoring and answering your questions, that you also come to us with those questions and don't just rely on SDN. One of the comments that we received during our first season is that we would be more lenient in terms of our academic rigor or requirements for matriculation into our new program, and that tends to be a myth. They're set for a specific reason because we want to make sure that you are ready for the rigors of medical school curriculum. So we wouldn't be lenient on them. We want you to be successful in our program. So make sure that you understand that just because there is a new medical school, that the information that they publish does not mean that they're going to be lenient on their requirements or their application process in general. We have very strict timelines, deadlines, our committee reviews files, and in order for us to continue that momentum and that rolling admissions, we need to make sure that we stay true to what we publish. And so we're not lenient in any case when it comes to those specific requirements. And the last thing that we see here, or that we saw during our first year, is that we were not able to receive federal financial aid. We are, and most institutions are that go through their correct process, and it's a good question to ask them. But for us, we were able to receive financial aid from the first year when we hit the door running because of our partner institutions. They had a history with the federal government, and we were just an addition to their offering at the medical school. And so some of the benefits of applying to a new program, I think the first is apparent, is that you would always and forever be known as the inaugural class. You hold a special place in the community. You hold a special place at the school itself, and maybe even the undergrad institution that school belongs to. But you'll always be known as the first class, and you have a special place. And with that, it is because you, as students, we put you at the center of everything that we do. So that inaugural class has a lot of say in what we are producing and what we're doing. We can only do so much before students arrive, and we can conceptualize what is it that we want to happen in the classroom, but we do put students at the center, and we listen to them, and your feedback is invaluable as we continue to refine and craft our medical school to become the medical school that we want to make sure that students want to come and be a part of. And so you have, as a student to a new medical school, you are privy to some of the new student organizations. I know that for us, the concept of student government, it was based on the traditional student government of having a president, a vice president, a secretary, a treasurer. But when our students got here, they felt that we wanted to switch it more to a Senate format. So now we have 7 senators that represent different areas of the School of Medicine where students have interaction. And so, again, we wouldn't have been able to do that. We, again, can conceptualize it, but our students have a final say, and your feedback is invaluable, and clearly we see it play out with us here at the School of Medicine. The other thing, too, is the feedback on the curriculum. Our faculty do a great job of putting things together to be delivered to our students, but without that feedback, we're not able to refine that process and refine what we are delivering for you and identify what is working, what is not working. Truly, our students are the individuals that are the most honest and that will tell us when something is not working, and our faculty will listen to that, and we will make changes to make sure that the next class that comes into the medical school can see the benefits of those changes. And any new medical school will go through various iterations of the changes and receiving feedback. I know that for us, our culture is that we receive feedback from our students on a yearly basis, not just from our first class, so we can continue refining what we're offering to our students. The other thing, too, that we take pride in here at the TCU and UNTHSU School of Medicine is our community engagement. Our students truly are the ones that engage with our community. The city of Fort Worth has been very giving and has been very welcoming to our School of Medicine, and they were excited and anxious for our students to get here when they did July of last year. And now that they've been here, our students truly have laid the groundwork and the foundation for what that community engagement piece looks like. And so we can conceptualize it, we can say what we want, but our students really dictate the direction that we go. And so through our student organizations and through our learning community set up with student affairs, our students have identified communities that they actually have working relationships and continuous working relationships that they will work with for the 4 years that they're here, including leaving a legacy for their peers to continue working for those programs and maybe even possibly expanding in the future. And the last thing that we also put our students in the forefront is for clinical partners. Now that we have our students here, now that our clinical partners have seen our students, our clinical capacity has expanded in terms of residency programs. One of the hospitals here in Fort Worth, Texas, recently announced that they added additional residency program at one of the hospitals here, and it was because of the work and the demonstration that our students are putting forth and putting our name as a School of Medicine out there. And so we credit our students with that, because without our students, I think our clinical partners maybe will be a little bit more hesitant in offering or even expanding their clinical offerings in the city. So definitely a new medical school brings some additional clinical presence within the city itself, but also for our medical students to experience other facilities and other clinical partners that they otherwise might not be able to experience. So thank you so much.
Many thanks, Carlos, and thanks to all for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. And I'm incredibly delighted to share with you a little bit about our Kaiser Permanente Bernard J. Tyson School of Medicine and share with you some of the myths and truths about attending a new medical school. So I thought I would begin by sharing a little bit about who we are. We are a new medical school in Pasadena, California, and although we're located in California, I think it's important to recognize that we are a national school, and we are a new school with a curriculum that is essentially focused on innovation and really reimagining medical education and healthcare delivery. Equity, inclusion, and diversity is essentially embedded in everything that we do here at the school, and we have curricularized wellness. We're cognizant that the rate of burnout is on the rise, both for physicians and medical students. So our class sizes are small, and that was done in ways that are very intentional. We will do our teaching in 6 small groups of 8 students, and the ratio of faculty to students will be 2 faculty to every 8 students. So again, this was done in ways that are very intentional because we know that we will have the opportunity to have very directed one-on-one engagement with our students. We were founded in 2016, but our inaugural class has not yet started. We are opening our doors at July of this year, so we have been incredibly busy with applications and with interviews, and we are looking forward to that day. I've already talked a little bit about our innovative educational approaches, and I think it's important to also recognize that our tuition will be waived, and again, well-being is embedded and integrated throughout the curriculum. I wanted to share with you some of the myths that we are very aware that's out there about attending a new medical school. So I'll start with accreditation issues, and I think it's important to have some sense of how accreditation works for new medical schools. We received our preliminary accreditation in February of 2019 by the Liaison Committee on Medical Education, and that is for any new school, that's essentially what everyone gets, preliminary accreditation. Our new school will be ready for provisional accreditation 18 months after our inaugural class has enrolled, and then we will have final accreditation granted upon graduation of that first class. So, you know, I think that although students tend to worry about new schools and accreditation issues, I hope that you will not be too preoccupied with that concern, because we're actually funded through 10 years. For schools who don't get their final accreditation, it's often due to funding issues. I think another new medical schools is the lack of faculty expertise, and we've been incredibly fortunate in that regard. The first group that we recruited was our leadership team, and we are coming to the School of Medicine with different degrees of expertise. We're coming in from about 15 institutions, so we are feeling quite ready in that regard. The other big issue is does attending a new medical school place students at risk for performing poorly on step one? I think most of you are probably aware that we just got news that step one may go to pass-fail as early as 2022. And even prior to this, I will tell you that we were incredibly excited to hear that news, because as a group here at our new school, that's the direction in which we really believed that step one should go. Having said that, though, it's also important to recognize that at our school, we've actually mapped out our curriculum and vetted it across step one. So again, we are quite confident that any student who enrolls with us at our school will be quite prepared for step one. I think one of the fourth myths about attending a new medical school is whether, as a student who matriculates with us, will you be able to compete or, you know, get a placement at an outstanding residency program. And I think as schools have, or programs I should say, have become increasingly more aware of our presence and also more aware of our curriculum and some of the redesigning that we're doing, we've already had folks reaching out to us, you know, letting us know that they would love to have our students. So again, that is not an issue that we are particularly concerned about. And then I think the last new myth is, what is the funding like at the school? Do I run a risk as a student of having to leave that school because it is not adequately funding? And as I mentioned a little earlier, we are in no way concerned about that at the school, as we have 10 years worth of funding, and we do get additional years added on an annual basis. I do believe that there are significant advantages to attending a new medical school. And the first one that comes to mind to me is the opportunity to be in an innovative environment. I think every new school has the opportunity to really build their programming from the ground up. And with that opportunity, we are the sky truly is the limit. So I do believe that it is an opportunity of a lifetime. In terms of an inaugural class leaving a legacy, it was mentioned earlier that, you know, and I completely agree, you will forever be that first class. And because you will be that first class, you will inform the culture and climate of the school, and you will also inform some of the potential curricular changes. So I think we will have a mechanism by which our inaugural class will provide feedback. And I do think that too is a phenomenal opportunity. You know, unlike the myth about not placing in competitive residencies, I do think if you came to our school, you would stand out to many, many residency programs. So I do think, again, being part of an innovative curriculum and an innovative environment will look quite positively to residency programs. I've already talked a little bit about the opportunity to provide feedback and inform curricular changes, as well as the opportunity to influence climate and culture. Just a few tips about applying to medical school. I thought that it's important to share with you to keep an active log of your activity and experiences. I do think that for many students, if you're not keeping an active log, it's easy to forget as you're readying yourself to apply to medical school. Ensure that you're reviewing the website and specifically the mission and vision of the medical schools to which you're applying. And I think that is such an important aspect of applying to medical schools. When we review applications here at the school, we are truly looking for mission fit students. And so again, do ensure that when you look at the mission and the vision of the schools, that those seem to be well aligned with your own personal and professional values. Do ensure that you meet the school's requirements. You know, we do check. So again, that's going to be an important aspect to applying to medical school. Do take the MCAT when you feel the readiness to do so. I think one of the biggest pitfalls for medical students is sort of rushing in to take the MCAT because someone told them that, you know, there was a right or a wrong time to take it. And I would say that the best time to take the MCAT is when you are feeling that readiness. Once you are ready to apply, please do so early. Again, as a new school, we were absolutely flooded with applications. And as was mentioned in the earlier segment, sometimes there is a thought that that particular school is new, so it's not going to be competitive. It actually will be. So please ensure that you are applying early. And then lastly, please remember to request your letters of recommendation well in advance. Do give your letter writers plenty of time to get those letters written and uploaded. And with that, again, it's been a privilege speaking with the group, and I hope to answer questions that you may have, and I will now turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much to the both of you for your presentations. It was great, and we do have a lot of questions in the queue. So I'm going to try to combine some of these and get as many answers as possible. Please keep in mind that if your question is not answered, you can always come back onto the virtual fair side and ask your question there as well in the booth, which is open until 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So the first question I'm going to address is U.S. medical schools versus applying to medical schools in the Caribbean or Mexico. So somebody was asking, what is the difference in application process with these two different locations? And also, are there different opportunities for clerkship, residency, and internships in the United States versus maybe a medical school somewhere else? So I don't know if either of you could shed some light on that or the different opportunities that you know of with your schools.
So I think for us, from our perspective here is, we know our process, right? I can't speak to the process of applying to a medical school in Mexico or the Caribbean islands, and the same goes for their curriculum. But I think what we have is a good infrastructure in terms of application processing. The AAMC does a good job. That is a centralized application that, in a sense, standardizes everything for us to some certain degree. and then that's distributed out to each program that you're applying to. And so they help a lot in centralize that process, including letters of recommendation. And so I would imagine that that's one of the hugest benefits that we see from our perspective is that centralized process. And it would be the same for the residencies and the clerkships. When a medical student gets into the medical education at the later year, especially when they're trying to identify what specialty or what residency they want to do for pretty much the rest of their life, they've also centralized those opportunities by creating a program, the Visiting Student Learning Opportunities Program. And so instead of having students go out and look for these clerkships, you go onto the system and you look and you say you're looking for specialty in pediatrics, and you can look at all of the specialties, all of the residency options for pediatrics. So from our standpoint and from our program participants of the AAMC, they have a lot of programs and a lot of processes in place to support medical schools in a centralized format.
And the only thing that I would add is the last part regarding opportunities for residencies and internships in the U.S. I will say that most residency programs have become increasingly more competitive, so I do believe that training in the Caribbean may put that particular student at risk for not being able to match in the U.S.
Great. Thank you so much for your answers to those questions. Another question for the both of you. Someone was asking in regards to tuition waivers for new schools, and if you could shed some light on how that is for each of your schools.
So I can start, and we have ensured that for every student who matriculates to our school, the tuition will essentially be covered. The cost that's left over from that is about $34,500, but we also have significant funding for students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. So our funding streams are quite significant.
And so for us, our first year class received a full paid tuition scholarship by a gracious donor here in our city. And we're seeing this. I think people are starting to take notice that across the country, medical education or going to medical school is becoming quite expensive. And so the donor arms or the development arms of the institutions are hitting the ground hard at running. For us, our commitment to our students has been that we will try as much as possible to offset at least 15% off the top of their tuition. As a private institution, we encompass all fees and everything within the tuition, so we don't have any additional fees from that perspective. But every institution, I think, dedicates a significant amount of time and spends countless of hours looking at how they can help students get through the program with as little debt as possible.
Great. Thank you so much. Another question that came in, considering both your schools are new, what would you expect an average GPA or MCAT score that students should aim for considering there haven't been previous classes?
So I will begin at the Kaiser Permanente Bernard J. Tyson School of Medicine. We conduct holistic reviews, so we do not do any pre-screening. We have no minimum GPA or MCAT scores, and so again, we read each file, and we are ultimately looking for students who have the academic readiness for medical school, but also are mission fit for us.
And so I echo that to my colleague, is that there is no baseline for us, and it's really hard to predict, especially as a new medical school, what that baseline will be like because it varies depending on the applicant pool. But now that we have successfully matriculated our first class on our website, you can see the class profile and the MCAT and GPA averages of that first incoming class. And every year it just gets more competitive. So for our new medical school, there was really no baseline. It was truly a mission fit and looking at it in a holistic approach.
Great. And also on the same topic of not having previous classes, without having the statistics from those previous classes, what is the best method you recommend for prospective students to gauge the competition when applying to your medical school, or what are the most important admission factors?
Again, I can begin. The advice that I give to every medical student, depending on whether you're still in college or you graduated, et cetera, if you're still in college, I do believe that it's important to meet with your pre-health advisor, if there is one that exists at your school. If you are in a post-bac program, for example, I do believe it's important to meet with your, post-bac director or your faculty advisors within that post-bac program. So, I do think that those persons would have significant experience in working with many pre-med students. So again, I think that would be, for me, the message. I talked about mission fitness and ensuring that every pre-med student has a sense of the mission and vision of the medical schools to which they are applying. And so in terms of the important factors, I do believe that for every medical school, especially those conducting holistic review, we do read every part of your file, and we're looking for students who seem to have a clear idea of why they are pursuing medicine. And again, we are looking to ensure that as a student, you are well aligned with our mission. And I think we're able to look at those factors by reading your personal statement. We're able to think about some of the attributes that we think are important to thrive here at the school by reading your letters of recommendation. The secondary application at each medical school really speaks to the mission of every school. So we do read the secondary applications very, very carefully. So I'll stop there.
And same for us. We're really looking for that mission fit and that commitment to our medical school and whether you will be a successful student into our program. Truly, again, all medical schools while at the same time trying to recruit, they want to make sure that their students are successful in their program. And so we do look at the secondary application. Our application is very unique because we have a very unique component to that secondary application that we don't think a lot of other medical schools are doing. So make sure that when you're doing your application, you pay attention to those the rules and the policies behind responding to our secondary application. And we tailor that application to really speak to what we're looking for in our students. So if you answer honestly and you put your best foot forward, you have as much success as anybody in the applicant pool in our program. So, I hope that answers that question.
Great, thank you. Received another question that is particularly directed towards Mr. Tapia. So it says, can M1 students take advantage of the Decision Development Coaching Initiative, or would students wait until their third year? And can you talk about the expectations from this program?
So great question. The Physician Development Coach initiative is truly our support for our students. So our students are broken up into learning communities of 10 students, and then as we continue to add incoming classes, they'll add an additional 10. So total 40 per 2 coaches. And they're truly there to support you through your educational journey. It's not a program you sign up for. It's a program that you are put into because we believe that in order for a student to be successful, they must have the support and the resources whenever they're in the verge of stumbling, or if they're also there just to help and answer questions that a student may have. And so they are certified by the Coaching Federation as coaches, but they're also actually practicing physicians. These are clinicians that have been in the same shoes that our medical students are in, and so we feel what better perspective than somebody that has walked in their shoes. Mind you, they have done this a long time ago, but they know some of the struggles that you might face. They know that there'll be sleepless nights where you'll be studying for step 1. They know that there might be weeks where your test or the content that you're studying is going to drive you insane. And so they're there to help you through that educational journey. It's not something that you take advantage of later in your education, like year 3. It's something that from day one, when you arrive on campus on orientation, you're introduced to your coaches and you participate in that coaching initiative. In a sense, instead of having advising at our medical school, we have the Physician Development Coach Initiative.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Another question received for both of you. Both of your schools look at the CASPER. I'm curious the person is curious how you're using the results of that test in considering an applicant and building a class.
I can start. We debated back and forth for quite some time regarding whether we would use the CASPER, and we landed on using it this first year primarily to track how it sort of lines up, for example, with our interview process and other aspects of the application. So we are not using it in year 1 this year for actual decision making. And at the end of this cycle, we will make a final decision regarding whether we will use the CASPER moving forward.
At the TCU and UNTHC School of Medicine, we don't use CASPER at all.
Okay, great. Thank you. Could you both talk about some of the research type opportunities that your schools will offer?
So for us at the TCU and UNTHC School of Medicine, our students are required to complete a 4-year scholarly project, and it's part of the curriculum. It is embedded because part of our mission, while it is important for our students to understand the patient-physician relationship, we also want them to understand that it's important for them to know that they will always be lifelong learners. So the SPT, what we call Scholarly Pursuit and Thesis, is the research project based on any area of interest of the student. They are paired with a mentor in that area of interest, and they work on it for 4 years. The goal at the end of 4 years is not for the research to get published, but there is a possibility for a poster presentation, but it is to give a sense to the student that this is something that they will always continue to do beyond medical school. And that's where we involve the research. We're not a research-heavy program per se in that aspect, but there is some expectation that students complete a 4-year research project.
And likewise at our school, we too have a scholarly project that needs to be completed well before graduation. And the way that we structured our scholarly project, students can do either a basic project or they can do a more advanced project. The more advanced project would entail putting together manuscripts for publication, and our most basic scholarly project may involve selecting a topic and conducting a lit review on. And you know, our scholarly project is really centered on recognizing the importance of inquiry. In terms of research at the school, we don't have wet labs at the school, but you know, Kaiser Permanente has one of the largest clinical databases in the country. So our students who are interested in health outcomes, et cetera, would be able to work with a mentor on those types of projects. But we have a few partnering institutions that our students will be able to do their research at. If they're interested in wet lab research, for example, students can go 1.5 miles down the road to Caltech, and they have already agreed to take on and mentor our students. And then there are other institutions throughout here in California where many of our students can participate in research projects. So in conclusion, we do value research. It is not it's by no means the only thing that we value. It's part of, you know, we look at it in the context of the entire portfolio. And again, every student who comes here will have to do a scholarly project as a graduation requirement.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Another question for you, Lyndia, that was directed towards you. Someone asked, can you speak a little bit about your MD, PhD opportunity and program?
Yes, absolutely. So we are partnering with Caltech for the MD PhD program. We will have 1 to 3 spots available this upcoming year for students. And the way that you would apply into our program is just as it is for any other medical school's MD PhD program. It will be a separate, you would check a separate box on the primary AMCAS application. This year we've had some incredible candidates come through to interview. When you are selected to interview for the MD PhD program, you interview first at the medical school, and subsequent to that, Caltech will also conduct their own interviews. So again, it is here, and over time, we may have the opportunity to increase the number of slots.
Great. And then another question directed towards the both of you. Could you talk a little bit about the mentorship at your school with medical students, and particularly about the advising role and how advisors will work with your students?
So for us here at the TCU and UNTHC School of Medicine, it's really the advisor capacity is taken by our physician development coaches, and again, they work with them from day one, so that's the relationship that they build. And maybe to clarify even further, the way that coaching works is if you have a goal or a goal in mind, that they will help you reach that goal. They are not going to make preconceived notions based on maybe performance in an exam or performance in your step 1 scores. They will help you get there from the get-go when you explain what that goal is, to make sure that you're prepared for that. So it's sort of in reverse. Instead of saying, now I know what I want to do, now what I can do with where I'm at, is our coaches are going to work with you to prepare to get you there. And so that's the capacity. But we also, through our Office of Diversity and Inclusion, have created a mentorship program that goes beyond the walls of our medical school. It's really with other clinical partners or other physicians in the community that represent our class in terms of race, ethnicity, profession, other facets and stories that they bring from their journey. And so our Office of Diversity is facilitating that, and they've had 2 events, and it's been very successful. So inside, I think, the School of Medicine, there is a great support system, and then the Office of Diversity is going beyond what's inside the medical school to even provide more mentors out in the community for our students.
And at our school, each of our students will be assigned a physician coach. It's someone in the Permanente medical group. There will be 8 groups of 6 students, and it'll be 1 coach to 6 students, but you will have individual time with your coach. And as was mentioned before, coaching is very different to mentorship. Our coach is really there to help you achieve your highest performance, and you can think about it, for example, as an athletic coach or a music coach or whatever else. I think in this regard, they will help you with your personal and professional goals, but first and foremost, a lot of the work is on the part of the students in terms of identifying strengths and weaknesses. And then lastly, we do envision also having specialty mentors, career mentors for our students. So we have a very, very robust career advising office here at the school.
Great. Thank you so much. Another question that a lot of people have been asking is if you guys have an idea of maybe what your first wave of applications will be, as in how many you are looking to accept or how many slots you think you'll have. So if you guys could shed some light on that, that would be great.
So we are small. We have 48 seats, and again, without historical data, it is difficult to determine how many students we will ultimately need to accept to fill those 48 spots.
So our class size is 60. Last year, for the first class, incoming class with no historical data, we made about 60, 65, or I think actually incorrect. We made about 80 offers, and again, that was based on brand new medical school without any history. Now that we have that, we might adjust, but our class size will remain at 60 because of a very unique component to our clerkship model, which is a longitudinal integrated clerkship.
Great. Another question was about the MCAT and having a gap year. So one person wanted to know is that they took an MCAT prep course and also did some other clinical work and got more experience under their belt. Would that be considered a bad look on their application if they took a year off to do those things, or do you think that that's a great idea and it's looked well upon in the application? So if you two could shed your opinions on that as well, that'd be great.
I think for us at the TCU and UNTHC School of Medicine, it's not frowned upon if you took a year in between academics or for whatever reason, as long as you continuously are working to improve your application. It would be very different if you took a gap year just to travel the world and not do anything at all to focus on preparing yourself for the rigors of applying to medical school. But if you specifically are taking time off to study for that, make sure for the MCAT, make sure that you're also doing your extracurricular activities as you continue to build on your application. I always tell pre-med students that the journey to medicine is a long one, and the journey through medicine is a long one, that at the end of the day, the goal is to get an offer of admission to a medical school, and until that happens, you must continuously work to achieve that goal. And so even with that break, you must continue to work to improve that application so that way that it's visible for our admissions committee to see the reason why maybe there was a gap in your academics or why you were doing something different. We can see that delineation in there, and you might even have the possibility of explaining that in your application to our committee.
And I agree with everything that was said. Here at our school, we do view gap years pretty favorably. We're aware that more students than not are taking that additional year. Some students will take that additional year to, increase their readiness, i.e. through a post-baccalaureate program. Some students are in pursuit of a master's program, and some students, frankly, have to work before coming to medical school. So we view it favorably, and I do agree that if you do take the gap year, you would need to be ready to speak to that during an interview, as it will more likely than not come up during the interviews. But I think overall, again, we do view gap years pretty favorably here at the school.
Great. And Lindia, if you could go into more detail about what you meant by holistic review to give some students some clarification, that would be great as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. So when we talk about holistic review, what we're really addressing is not just viewing students in the context of their metrics. I think when you look back historically, that is, for example, what many medical schools have done, and frankly, what many medical schools will still do. I do believe that looking at all of the other aspects of a student's portfolio, looking, for example, at distance travel, that's extraordinarily important for us as we're reviewing files. If a candidate, for example, is applying to medical school and they didn't have the social capital than other students did, that is to some degree distance travel. So again, when we speak to holistic review, we are looking at our students not simply through their GPA and through their MCAT, but really reading personal statements carefully, really trying to understand the motivation to pursue medicine. And then again, one of the most important aspects of a holistic review process is this concept of mission fitness, right? So we are always looking for students who we believe are well aligned with our mission. I hope that clarifies it a bit.
Yes, that was great. And Carlos, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I agree with everything she said. A holistic approach to admissions is something I think that has been working for all medical schools, and we go beyond the academics.
Great. Thank you so much. And another question, do you have any advice when it comes to filling out the section of the application about the personal statement? Anything you think in particular students should focus on that admissions officers would want to see in the personal statement?
For us, when we look at personal statements, what sometimes we get is these very complex and elaborate stories that applicants tend to craft to try to explain and convey their message. I could say from recommendation of reading thousands of them that the best thing for you to do is just be honest and be true to yourself. We get the idea of why you would want to capture the reader when they're reading your personal statement, but it sometimes can get a little bit carried away and become more of a story than a personal statement. So try to stay away from it becoming a story and more about your personal story and your journey to medicine and why medicine. I think that's the most important thing for us here, and I think just to get across. And so don't make it too complex. I know it's a tedious process, it's a difficult process, it can be laborious, and I know it makes our applicants nervous, but be true to yourself and stay away from trying to make it a story or storytelling to paint who you are.
And I would agree wholeheartedly with that. When I provide pre-med students with advice about writing their personal statement, I ask them to first reflect on why, and have you reflect on why you want to be a doctor in the first place. And I know that sounds somewhat simplistic, but I think it's extraordinarily important that you are able to truly communicate that in ways that are clear, and I agree as well in ways that are fairly simple. The way that I like to think about this is if someone has to read and reread your personal statement because they're not quite understanding, again, I think many students do try to make it a literary piece, and that's not quite what admissions committees are looking for, and that's not what file reviewers are looking for. We really want you to tell us who you are, and so I think your authentic self needs to be reflected in your personal statement.
Great, thank you so much. And I think we have time for one more question. Many different students were asking the type of style the different classes will be conducted through medical school and what particularly will be focused on in the teaching style with the different classes. So if you guys have any ideas or you can share about how your classes will be taught, that would be great.
So I can start. Our teaching will be done, I think, quite non-traditionally. So we are a non-lecture-based school. All of our teaching and learning will happen in small groups in a team-based learning, utilizing a team-based learning approach. We don't have individual courses. All of our coursework will be completely integrated. So the clinical sciences will be integrated with the health system sciences, which is where you learn all of the policy and issues of health inequity and disparities. And that too will, all the sciencey stuff will also be, or our sciences will also be integrated and embedded in that. So most of the teaching approaches will be utilizing cases. So it really is a case-based learning approach without individual courses.
And so I think a lot of new medical schools are switching to that same approach that Kaiser's switching, because I know we are taking that same mentality that we are not lecture-based. You truly come to class to apply the content, and there's different methodologies that our faculty use to apply the content. It can be team-based learning, it can be case-based learning, but the way the week is set up is we bring you to class on Monday to set up the week and whatever topic is going to be discussed, and then during the week you have the different sessions that go over the content for that week. But as a student, you are responsible for your own learning and capturing that. And in many cases, you are teaching your peers because you're responsible for a section of what is being discussed in class, and another student is responsible for another section. And so you all come together again to apply that content. And then we wrap up at the end of the week, bringing everybody together to summarize what had happened during the week and what everybody learned. It's still very specific to a course, so there's different courses that you're going to go through. We do have some longitudinal courses that will run all year long. That is clinical skills, where you teach how to do examinations from head to toe. It is our scholarly pursuit and thesis. That's something that you will always continue to work on. And then we do have what we call the Introduction to Longitudinal Integrated Clerkship, and that means that you are responsible for going out and meeting with your preceptor and interacting with patients even during year one. And so you have some time doing that as well. But we truly don't have lecture-based. We don't record lectures. I know many schools still do that, so students can watch them on their own. You're responsible for coming to class to apply the content and actively participate.
And I'll just add that we do. Sorry, no worries. Sorry about that. We do record our courses. However, you are required to be in the classroom beginning at 8 a.m.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you both being here today. Like I said earlier, we weren't able to get to all the questions, but if anyone wants to get an answer to their question, please go ahead and go into the virtual fair booth where you can have different representatives answer them as well until 8 p.m. Eastern time today. And again, thank you so much to our medical school professionals, Dr. Lindia Wills-Jacobo and Carlos Tapia. Thank you again for being here, and have a great rest of the time at the virtual fair.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this webinar.
Thank you so much.